not producing the wealth. The jobs have gone overseas, and the debt is still with us. We have, we will this year raise the national debt over $2 trillion. In the last 12 months, the national debt went up $2.2 trillion. And that will probably expand, because the one thing they can't do is really project those numbers accurately, because they don't know how many people are going to be employed next year. I mean, unemployment might be 11% for all they know, and therefore the revenues go down. So part of the reason that the deficit is exploding is that the deficits, that the economy is weak and there are less revenues. But the other part is the expenditures haven't slowed up. You know, if you or I got into trouble and with too many credit cards and too much debt, and we felt somewhat responsible to get our house in order, what we would do is stop spending and take a second job and start paying down the debt, which some people are capable of doing. That's what needs to be done to the economy, and we're doing everything at the Washington level to do exactly the opposite. We're not cutting any spending. We're not paying down debt. What they're doing is transferring the debt from the people who made billions to the taxpayers. You take the derivatives, you know, those financial assets they call illiquid. Well, they're in the Federal Reserve now. And even the Treasury bills, which is a weak backing to a currency, they've been given to the banks and to Goldman Sachs. So they're holding the Treasury bills, and we, the taxpayer, are holding mortgage security and derivatives in order to prop the system up. And so it's a powder keg in many ways. There's been no correction. When an economy gets out of whack due to the inflationary conditions of what the Federal Reserve does, and all the anticipation and the false information they have, it gets to the point where you need a correction. You can temporarily keep the correction from coming, but you can't prevent it forever. So since 1971, we've had, what, 6 or 8 significant recessions. And that's the market always saying, you're overdoing it, it's out or kilter. But we kept piling on the debt, consuming our wealth, until finally the big correction had to come, and we're in the midst of it. But we're doing everything possible to prevent the correction. And if you're doing something to yourself, harming yourself, the correction is stop doing it. If you drink too much or smoke too much, the correction is stopping. But in our case, the correction means that we have to cut spending, cut taxes, cut regulations, cut the deficit, cut printing money. And we're doing everything more so. And it makes things worse, so we do more and more. And it will stop the economy, but the next sign will be the dollar. The financial structure is done. I don't think they can rebuild the international financial system on a dollar standard, a paper dollar standard. And the opposition, those who are really in charge of our Federal Reserve and our Treasury and our government, they know that. And they're already working in collusion with the central banks of the world to come up with the alternative. They want a worldwide paper currency run by the United Nations and the IMF and SDRs. And that is what they're working on. And I would say that it shouldn't be difficult for us to say, absolutely not. We don't need that. But they do not want to accept the restraints of honest money and the Constitution and morality. And that's where the problem comes with the Federal Reserve. It is immoral, it's unconstitutional, it's bad economic policy, and it gives us the economic crisis. And so it's something that has to be addressed. The Federal Reserve is set up so government can grow in a sinister way where they don't have to be responsible. And you can finance a welfare state if you monetize the debt. You can run this worldwide empire, which is so destructive and so harmful to us, and they can finance those debts the same way. But not only that, is the Federal Reserve is a government unto itself. They can literally create trillions of dollars, which they've had especially in these last couple of years, put it into the hands of foreign governments, into the hands of foreign banks, into the hands of international financial organizations, into the hands of corporations. And we've had no authority to go in and examine that. They don't want to tell us what they're doing. So they have the entire power of Congress. Congress thinks they're real important, and they should be a lot more important and curtail this and have oversight and do all these things, but they don't. They just continue to ignore the important issues until now. Now we're getting their attention. The freedom movement is getting all their attention, because I think we have proven a point, especially on this monetary issue. What happened was when the TARP funds were appropriated and authorized, the information got out that finally the Congress didn't even know where the money was going. They had no idea. The people sensed this. The economy was getting weaker and weaker, and people wanting to know what was happening, and so they put a lot of pressure on Congress, and they got a lot of attention. But then it turns out that this is a small matter compared to the trillions of dollars involved in the Federal Reserve. So that is what opened up the opportunity for us to be able to move this bill and make the point, look, if you want to know where the TARP funds are, you got to know what the Federal Reserve is doing. And that is why the bill to audit the Fed, which the most I ever had before on that bill was 18, and today it's 282. Yeah. 75% of the American people say it's right to know what the Federal Reserve is doing. Now, the one reason we got such a cross-section on this is because the American people want transparency. And this is a bill of transparency. This is not a bill that has in it to design the replacement for the monetary system, because that would have been a more giant leap. People wouldn't have signed on to that. But they are willing to look into it. But if we know more about what they're doing, what kind of deals are being made, and who's been benefiting, believe me, that will usher in the day when we can have true reform. The odds of this bill being passed as a bill on itself, standalone bill, quite frankly, I think are very slim. It could happen if the American people put enough pressure on them and things come together, but the odds aren't very good. The odds of the bill being passed with their strong effort to water it down a bit is pretty good. I think they know that there's such strong public sentiment that they're going to permit something, and they'll probably attach it to some horrible bill for a reform on the regulatory system. So that's a possibility of what will happen. But the question comes up is, why, if you have a majority of the people who are for it, why don't they just bring it to the floor? Don't they have to? No, they don't have to. The 290 vote means you have enough votes for it to pass under suspension. Just, the majority, the super majority support it, just bring it to the floor. They could if they wanted to. Pelosi could bring it up on Monday. The first Monday we go back, and it could be under suspension. And I imagine there wouldn't be very many who would oppose it. But it's not going to happen. The establishment does not want this. And I think if you get to be president or vice president or speaker of the House, the establishment have a lot of influence on those individuals. So they will be restrained in bringing this up unless the momentum continues, and I think that is a possibility. So we don't know exactly what will happen, but something is going to happen in the next several months. But let's say they take that bill and they do nothing. Let's say they refuse to, or pass something that's totally worthless. I think then those individuals, the groups, the citizens who have been pushing this bill, as well as the 75% who think transparency is a good idea, they're going to be outraged, because it'll prove our point that they would defy this huge majority of people and common sense in the Constitution in order to protect their secrecy on what they're doing. So I work on the assumption, I do not know for sure, but I know one thing: we can continue with this issue. This issue is going to be important for a long time to come.